Check out this mug that I got for Christmas. Funny thing is, I actually got this exact one from both my brother and my mother-in-law, so they know me well. I'm gonna talk about a 100-mile race today. We're gonna talk about Hellbender 100 in Old Fort, North Carolina. I just completed it, I think it was like 3 weekends ago. This was a challenging course, but so scenic, so absolutely beautiful. I came in 8th overall and first woman, and actually set a new course record for women as well, so that was exciting. And like I said, this was a beautiful course, but unfortunately this was the most mentally challenging race for me personally. And we're gonna get into that. We're gonna talk about, my race experience. I'm gonna do a complete race review, and then I'm gonna give you guys some pro tips on successfully completing the Hellbender 100 miler and what you can do if you're thinking about doing this race. Let's get right into it. My name is Tara, otherwise known as Candy Mama, and we're gonna talk all things Hellbender 100 today. Hellbender 100 takes its name after the largest North American salamander. Some other common fun names for this large reptile are snot otter, lasagna lizard, devil dog, mud dog, water dog, grampus, and Allegheny alligator. The Hellbender ranges from 9 to 29 inches in length, lives under rocks and riverbeds, generally keeping to themselves. They are super territorial. As for the race, the Hellbender 100 takes you up and over some of the highest mountains on the East Coast. There are 5 large ascents and descents, nearly 3,000 feet, altogether gaining 23,500 feet of loss and gain. The trail has sections of beautiful smooth single track and then some areas with technical rock scrambles. The course takes racers up and over the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi, being Mount Mitchell, reaching 6,684 feet. The race begins and ends at Camp Greer in Old Fort, North Carolina, and there's a lot of lodging opportunities around the area for hotels. You got a lot of Airbnbs. At Camp Greer, they have parking for RVs or vans. That's what we did, and you just pay $25 per person to park there. The pre-race briefing is on Thursday, and it's mandatory for attendance. They talk about race details. They also go over the required items you are required to bring as you're running in this race. And for this year, for 2023, the lists include for pacers and racers. So pacers also have to bring all these items as well. You're required to bring a headlamp, a backup light, and batteries, waterproof seam-sealed jacket, an emergency bivvy, insulating base layer, a warm hat and gloves, an emergency whistle, calories, hydration carrier that carries 40 ounces, a cell phone, and then the GPS unit provided by the race. In the description below, I'm going to have Amazon links to the items that I brought out there that I think would work for anyone. You can purchase them in the links below. So Carrie Barris is the race director. She's relatively new to directing this race. She did the pre-race briefing and was very knowledgeable about everything. She's very responsive in her emails. I emailed her a couple times and she always emailed back within the day. But she also has this beautiful, touching story about her history with the race, so she shared at the pre-race briefing. During the race, I did see her at several aid stations. She popped up and, would cheer people on, and then at the end, I saw her. This was at like early morning, like 5:15 a.m. She greeted everyone who came through with a smile, so I just think she is great, a really top-notch race director. The race begins on Friday at 4:30 a.m. And the reason it starts so early on Friday is because Mount Mitchell is a state park. That area is a state park. And with it being a state park, they need everyone out of there before sundown. Speaking on the volunteers, there were so many, and they were extremely knowledgeable about the course and very quick to help with whatever I needed or whatever anyone needed, really. Aid stations were well stocked with the ultramarathon essential foods. This course has some pretty relentless climbs that are not common for the East, but it really reminded me of climbing out west on the trails. I've done races with either the same or more climbing, and it hasn't been quite as exhausting as this race was. There are 5 major large climbs among a lot of other smaller climbs, but the 5 main climbs that you do is Heartbreaker, Snook's Nose, Mount Mitchell. You climb up to Bonkum, and then you climb up from Curtis Creek Aid Station. There are plenty of small ups and downs like I mentioned, but these ones in particular were just like super long and sustained, and my legs were screaming by the end of the race. Immediately after the race starts, I climbed up and out of Camp Greer using some pretty runnable uphill Forest Service roads. It wasn't a crazy grade, it was definitely runnable, and it felt easy, but with like any ultra marathon, it's gonna feel easy in the beginning. Pro tip though, my first pro tip for hellbender is pay attention to the first 23 miles because you're actually going to be tracing that back to the finish at the end. Another pro tip is, even though it feels really easy and simple to run up, I would walk at portions because I did feel like I didn't have as much energy for going uphill at the end of the race, and that's pretty common. But I think if I took it a little easier, I might have had more energy towards the end of the race. I would just focus on keeping an even breathing pattern. I mean, that's a good indicator in how you're doing with effort. So if you start breathing a little heavier, maybe like walk for a little bit and take it easy. I'd also recommend for this first portion, even though you're starting at 4:30 a.m., it's still night, the sun starts coming up as you're still climbing Heartbreaker, and it gets a little humid and hot. People around me and me as well were sweating a lot and had to take in some salts. I'd recommend bringing your salt tabs for the entire race. So the sun did begin to rise, like I mentioned. As you get to the top of Heartbreaker, you go over the Blue Ridge Parkway, and then you just start descending down to Curtis Creek Aid Station. And this is still within the first 23 miles. So just realizing as you're going down this super fun downhill, as you're going down, realize this is within the first 23 miles. You are at the end of the race going to have to go all the way back up that. So after going all the way down to Curtis Creek Campground Aid Station, I replenished some fluids. And then immediately after that, you have to climb up Snook's Nose. That is 3,000 feet, I believe, in 3.5 miles. It's one of the shorter climbs of the 5, but it's the one with the craziest grade. It's tough, man. It's a tough uphill. Another pro tip is I wouldn't recommend bringing trekking poles for that first 23, 24 miles to Curtis Creek because I don't think they're super necessary. But then I would probably pack them in a drop bag at Curtis Creek. Crews are not allowed at Curtis Creek the first time through. They are allowed the second time through. So you're there on your own. So have a drop bag there with your trekking poles because this climb up Snook's Nose is pretty tough. It is definitely doable without trekking poles because I did it without trekking poles. And I think anyone can complete it without them, but they would just aid so much. They would have been so helpful if I had those trekking poles. Check it out. It's so beautiful. Took a little break here. Snook's Nose. That was hard. The first part of the uphill, I was positive and feeling good, but something switched in me mentally that lasted the entire race. I started spiraling into a lot of self-doubt and anxiety. They always say peaks and valleys with ultramarathons. It's like you're up and you're down, you're up and you're down. And I just expected that to be what happened here, and I expected the anxiety to go away, but this lasted. My anxiety and the self-doubt, this intense self-doubt, lasted the entire remainder of the race. So as I'm climbing up Snook's Nose, it's like I get anxious, and then I start breathing heavily because of anxiety and also because I'm climbing. And if I was just climbing, I would be able to keep moving. But because the anxiety was also like I was getting nervous and I was breathing heavier, I would have to stop and catch my breath. And unfortunately, this will be a trend for the rest of this video where I talk about my anxiety. After crossing the Blue Ridge Parkway, there is a couple ups and downs, or bippity bops, as my mom would put it, which just means like quick up and down. There's a lot of those, and then you just descend to Neal's Creek Aid Station, which at this point is 31.7 miles in. That is where I saw my crew for the first time, and I was being crewed by my husband Jonathan and Sarah, who I met at the Ohio Backyard Ultra. There I picked up some nutrition and was very prompt in getting those trekking poles too, because at this point we would be going up the third big climb, being Mount Mitchell. So I'm pretty familiar with this climb up to Mount Mitchell. It is not super difficult. It's not as difficult as Snook Snows, but it's a pretty steady grade and it's a beautiful trail, and it's 5 miles, and I think it's 3,600 feet in gain over 5 miles.
Really dehydrated, so it's not good. Trying to rehydrate, but I'm climbing, so it's taking me longer to get up here. Use more liquid. I don't know about this race. This is hard as hell. It's hard as hell. What race isn't though? Oh, Mount Mitchell.
Even though no one was passing me and I was doing super well, I was 3rd overall. But in my head, I was telling myself, I was like, I'm doing terribly, I'm doing so bad. And I'm not sure, like I said, where all the self-doubt came from, but it was overwhelming. And several times on Mount Mitchell, I had to stop and catch my breath.
I'm kind of going a little slower up Mount Mitchell because I feel terrible, and also I just kind of want to turn it on around mile 50, so I'm trying to conserve some energy.
This is
So Tara, while you were on trail, look, French press.
Gourmet.
Yes. Amazing. Woo! Yeah, Tara! Woo! You got this, Tara! Woo!
So this next portion of trail has some small ups and downs on very technical trail. My pro tip for this section is to take it easy and don't rush over these rocks. Make sure you're being very conscious of where you're stepping. After this point though, after the first couple miles, there will be a long downhill to the Colbert's Creek aid station. So it was at Colbert's Creek at 46.3. That's the next aid station I saw my crew at. That's where I heard my coach Carl Meltzer wasn't far behind me, and I was actually honestly really excited. So once you leave Colbert's Creek aid station, you immediately have a 3,000 foot ascent up to Bonkum. So if you thought Mount Mitchell was hard for me, then you haven't heard anything yet, because I was so mean to myself going up Bonkum, and this was just another tough portion for me. At one point, I just had to like verbally tell myself out loud, like, focus, because if I had just focused, it would have been better, but I couldn't snap out of it.
It's feeling a little sluggish going up Bonkum Horse Trail. Now, I'm running, trying to, I'm just in my head a lot right now, so kind of excited for night to like zone in and just get the thing done, listen to some music. I'm less than 50 miles from the end. My coach is very close by, because I am not feeling the best right now. Definitely dehydrated for sure, and haven't been eating enough, I don't think. But I mean, I did get up that pretty good. I just gotta stop stopping.
And at this point, Carl, my coach, actually came up behind me, and I made it a goal of mine to stick with him as long as I could, and we actually ran together for quite some time until we looped back to Neal's Creek aid station. But during that time, like, I told him about what was going on in my head, and then the sky opened up and it just started pouring rain. It was just pouring, and that was fine. But there was a lot of downhill portions on this, so I was able to bomb down those and like regain some like confidence in myself during those periods.
We love you guys.
We'll be here ready for you.
So they come this way again?
Yeah.
So as it was raining, we got to Neal's Creek aid station, and I was able to, replenish my fluids again and get some more nutrition, and then I was up and out of there. And so I got my rain jacket out and just started ascending up because you have a climb up at this point on a Forest Service road, and it started getting dark at this point. It was just raining, and it's a very easy runnable uphill. Like, you can definitely run up this Forest Service road, but I personally was having trouble doing that. I just could not catch my breath at those points where I was getting anxious and overwhelmed. And at this point too, I did throw up the food that I had eaten at the aid station. It's a pretty common trend for me to throw up though. So it was a quick downhill, and it was overall like 10 miles on your own before you get to Curtis Creek Campground a second time, and your crew can meet you there the second time, not the first time. And at that point I picked up my pacer, being Sarah, who I met at the Ohio Backyard Ultra. And this last portion, like I mentioned in the beginning, the first 23 to 24 miles is the same for the end, the back half of the race. So that once long and beautiful, fun downhill that I had at the beginning of the race was now a long, sustained uphill. And it was a long and arduous trek up 3,500 feet up, utilizing really great smooth trail, but also Forest Service road. And you could definitely run up those, but I personally could not. I will not reiterate this again. I feel like I've made it very known that I was struggling a lot mentally. During that time, Carl passed me and 3 other men passed me as well. So at this point I was sitting around 8th overall. But my confidence was really low at this point. At some points I would just sit on the side of the trail, and Sarah really was a superstar. She just used everything in the book to try to get me up and going. Very disappointed in myself, and that's really unfortunate to hear, because this was such a beautiful course and beautiful race, and the entire time I was doing this race I was so focused on myself and my performance that was honestly fine and good. But eventually, after what felt like 20 more hours, I got to the top of that uphill. Then you go all the way down Heartbreaker, that first mountain you went up, and that took forever. Like, in the beginning it felt like going uphill it wasn't that long, but going down it was like, this is taking forever. And you guys know me, I love those downhills, so I was able to really open up my gate and just start running as fast as I could. It felt so good to run down. And Garrett's Creek aid station is 6.5 miles until the end, and it threw me off because the smooth and easily runnable uphill that we did in the beginning now seem to be going uphill the other way. I think everyone expects to be going downhill on this last portion, and they forget that there was some ups and downs in the beginning. But just a pro tip, if you are expecting to do bippity bops, as my mom puts them, if you're expecting to have those in the last 6.5 miles, you'll be okay and you'll be fine. Because they weren't really tough. They were just like went on forever, and I was just like over it at that point. You do have a long downhill into the finish, and it's beautiful. I love downhills, as I've mentioned before, but it was just gorgeous and so nice. I was just like, yes, I'm almost done. So I finished around 5:15 a.m. with a time of 24:45, setting a new women's course record by 1 hour and 25 minutes. So I was 8th overall and first woman, and I got some pretty cool prizes. First of all, everyone gets one of these really neat belt buckles, and it's kind of a trend in 100-mile races. If you aren't familiar, get like a belt buckle. But this Hellbender 100 is one of my favorites that I have gotten from a race. I also got this really fun little Hellbender lizard here, made out of solid piece of wood. A local artist made that. I also got so surprised, but I got this new Gossamer gear pack. What is it called again? The Fast Kumo. The result obviously was great, and it was a positive outcome, but I am not super happy with the way that I experienced the race, but that is sometimes how these things go. Sometimes some races are harder than others. With all of that being said, I would definitely run this race again. It was well organized. It was beautiful. It had great volunteers, great aid stations. So I would run this race again, and I would focus on an even pace throughout the race, my nutrition, and then also my hydration, and just making sure, pay special attention to those things, because I feel like there might have been some brain fog from that, and then that was the result. That resulted in anxiety. And I think this race is good for anyone who has a basic level of endurance and experience with 100-mile races, that is. So making sure you get one in before doing this is important, because it is a tough race. It's a 40-hour limit, 40-hour cutoff. I think paying special attention before this race to the type of training you're doing is necessary. So doing a lot of uphill. Something that not a lot of people train when they're doing mountainous races is the downhill running. I think that is a point where you can make up a lot of time. So if your legs and knees are used to the pounding on those downhills, and you can run down the downhills, I think that would greatly benefit you. That was my experience and my race review of the Hellbender 100 miler. That was a tough video to make, to revisit those emotions, but I'm thankful that you guys came along for the journey. If you have any comments on maybe, you know, some sport specific psychology and, you know, what goes into anxiety during races or attempts like this, definitely comment below. Or if you just have something to mention, of similar experience, we can all talk about it in the comments below. If you did watch the very end, please comment a lizard emoji. This will let me know that you did watch the very end, and I will say hello in the comments. Hope to see you guys in the next video. See ya.